Welcome to the December essay called the Unwritten Essays. So I have succeeded in doing an essay every month this year. I am actually fairly proud of that. I'm not good at ritual or consistent activities generally. Have I become a better writer from writing these essays? Sure, I suppose I have. I think the experience of writing an essay every month has proven to me that repetition by itself isn't really enough to get better at something. The absence of critical feedback from anyone other than my partner makes progress of any kind like slow or hard to interpret. Rather than having any clear signposts of success, I'm kind of meandering through a process that feels organic and sometimes pretty undirected. But it's not wholly unsatisfying to learn to write that way. I'm not even really sure what getting it better at writing would really mean. And that makes me think about movement teaching. I am thinking about my writing skill, and I wonder if unpacking my attitude toward my writing says anything about teaching movement. I still think of my skill as a writer in terms of, can I publish my first draft? Or how well organized or succinct or interesting is my first draft? Now, as soon as I write or say that, I realize how silly it is. My first draft isn't going to be as good as the second one, and sometimes it won't even be as good as my other drafts. So, although I instinctively rate the goodness of my writing on this scale, if I reflect for even like 5 seconds, I have to reevaluate. What does that reevaluation lead me to? Well, I can look at the output of my writing, the finished essays, or I can look at my writing process. If I look at my outputs, the 12 essays I've written this year, it's really hard to say if my end products have gotten any better. But if I look at my process, I can see lots of changes. I have become more disciplined about revision. I have a consistent revision process now, which seems like a probably good thing. It's probably a key thing, actually. This year has helped me to more fully understand the process of being a good writer, engaging with each step as it happens, and then re-engaging with the repetitive nature of revision. What a surprise. Having an outline before I start writing seems really important, but I am really bad at actually using an outline. I think this leaves my writing a little stream of consciousness rather than organized by logic. I tend to free write, revise, go back, make kind of a rough or shoddy outline later, and then take the little bits I've written and rearrange them into what seems like a sensible order. My relationship with automated editors like Grammarly has definitely changed. I can largely predict their suggestions when I read back a sentence now. It feels a bit like having a coach. Seeing the feedback that I get from the computer consistently makes the patterns of good writing clear. Sometimes I love the way that the computer veers towards brevity and clarity and grammar. And sometimes I actually prefer my kind of meandering prose, my extra commas, my profuse overuse of semicolons, and my kind of exhausting tendency to add qualifications to every clause. This makes me realize the second semi-unconscious way that I rate my writing. How does it compare to my conversational skills or being in actual dialogue with someone? In person, I think I am quite a good storyteller. I feel skilled at piecing together complex thoughts, ideas, and values. My writing lags behind my speaking and my thinking. At least I think it does. I wonder if that's true for everyone who writes, or are there people out there for whom writing actually expands their understanding rather than seeming like a poor shadow of it? My thoughtfulness is well expressed in these essays, and so is my hopefully endearing preachiness around my values like creativity, rebelliousness, and dismantling hierarchies. But I don't think that my humor comes through yet. I have no idea how to write humor. I've enjoyed playing with the format of my writing, but I think my skill isn't quite up to the task. There's something to be said for mastering a basic essay in a way that I just haven't yet, or don't feel like I have. I have found value in playing with format anyway, if only to kind of satisfy my ambition and interest. So do I learn about movement teaching from all this? Well, first of all, our initial assessments tend to be trash. When we create snap judgments about our skills or our progress, they are not usually accurate. It's good always to take a moment and take stock and encourage your students to do the same. The perspective shift from being a good writer means writing a great first draft to being a good writer means having discipline, revision skills, and strong preparation seems like a pretty key lesson about learning and teaching movement or kind of anything. For those of you who have read and enjoyed these essays this year, thank you, and thank you for the responses you sent me. I have so many subjects that I haven't covered and essay prompts that I started but never followed through. Hopefully I'll get to them one day, but this month I am just laying them all out in a too long didn't read synopsis form for you. Essay 1, that I didn't do. The sportification of circus. This would be a compare and contrast style essay between circus and sports at both the educational level and the performance level. Many circus artists are recruited into performance from sport, from gymnastics, from sports acrobatics, from diving, from trampoline, and that can happen at a wide variety of different ages. Circus is the only performing art where this crossover with sport is so deeply integral. If we consider sports through a performance lens, consider the audience of sports, then we concede that the main difference between watching circus and watching sport is in rehearsal versus improvisation. But there are so many exceptions to this rule as well, gymnastics being the most obvious one. Even if we examine contemporary circuses like Gravity and Other Myths, or the reality of performing day to day with Cirque du Soleil, we begin to see that line breaking down. Acts are sometimes replaced with structured games, like in Gravity and Other Myths, and certain tricks or skills are subbed in and out daily. So the idea that we're just rehearsing and performing the exact same thing isn't really true. But I also wonder, as circus draws more and more from sports, if we begin to lose the uniqueness that forms the basis of variety-based forms. There is no sport, for example, for wire walking, hair hanging, or plate spinning. Are there hidden costs of pulling so heavily from sports? And does the competition, rather than festival nature of sports, start to seep into both the cultures of circus education and the cultures of circus performance or watching? Another unwritten essay was Teaching as a Commodity. This is a continuation of my analysis of capitalism in circus education. Is teaching a dynamic social relationship between two human beings, or a service or product to be consumed? And what are the theoretical implications of how we view our teaching in that sense? As we consider teaching broadly under the scope of capitalism, we have to differentiate between two often conflated forms of knowledge transfer: the creation of a product for teaching, or the rendering of a teaching service. The reason to create this differentiation is important because of the ephemeral nature of a service versus how a product or a digital product can be mined for more and more value without continued labor. On the one hand, the ability to create a product that contains instruction, knowledge, or practice is an invaluable component of teaching. I've done this with my online courses. On the other hand, when knowledge transfer and movement practice are stripped down to only this model, even if the teaching is delivered as a service that's packaged as a product, we risk impoverishing the rich social relationships and ties that can come to exist more easily under a less transactional framework. Conceding to aesthetics, performance, and beauty standards. What is the appropriate role for the value-centric coach when your student just wants to roll with conventional aesthetics and dominant modes of expression? What if a student wants to be conventional in their style, dress, and presentation because they think they'll get more likes on socials, or because they realize that they'll get more gigs? What if they just want to point their toes, get their splits, and fulfill expectations? What does the good coach do? Lean into their autonomy or resist? What are the ethical lines around encouraging or discouraging things like stretching the feet to get a better point, or changing the way a student eats to change their body shape? We have to recognize that conceding to aesthetics at one level means that we have to draw a line in the sand somewhere around our own values and whether we choose to support or not support actions our students want to take. Circus snobbery, pole, acro-yoga, classism, and cultural hierarchy. This is a history piece that I've wanted to write for a while, focused on the 2005 to 2015 period where I experienced and sometimes contributed to what I'll now term circus snobbery. The caveats that surround my or our relationships with heritage and traditional circuses, both in their aesthetics and training approaches, and how circus related to acro, yoga, and pole through kind of the early formational times of these kind of three ways of being in movement. For 2025, I'm going to try my hand at some short stories, small, largely autobiographical accounts of circus things. I want to stay away from preachiness and focus on developing the humor of my writing, and I hope that narrative writing will be an interesting change of pace. Hopefully, some of my humor will pop out, and at least it will be funny to fail at something if it doesn't. So continue following if you are looking forward to some short stories, and if you want to see all of the 2024 essays, you can actually get them emailed to you or go to the archive.